looking for escape, 'cause them I just want to escape.
Welcome back to my disembodied voice. Normally, I discuss a film or character on this channel, look at a psychological matrix and have a bit of a discussion. Yet today, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to ask a question. Now, not long back, I did a video called Getting Carrie White Right, and it produced some strong opinions and debates in the comments section. Now, as we all learn via interactions, observations and reflections with things in our phenomenal field of perceptual reality, I found some of the comments really quite enlightening. One of the main conversational patterns when it came to the 2013 version was how many, although not all, were of a younger age and had grown up with the Chloe Grace Moretz movie. Now, this got me thinking about remakes in general, how Hollywood approaches them, which ones work and which ones don't. Is there a secret to a good remake? And should we look at remakes through a different prism to that of the reverence with which we hold the originals in? If Carrie was remade again today, it would be vastly different to both the 1976 and 2013 versions. Society has witnessed so much between 76 and 23, be it the desensitisation of violence, the increase in school shootings, real-life tragedies now filmed and pumped across our screens via phone footage, and a media with an insatiable appetite for disaster porn, and, of course, a tenfold increase in media streaming which dictates new approaches and fetishised grittiness to every genre, as well as a whole new generation of horror films. And that's without mentioning the internet, mobile phones and social media, which are even more prevalent now than they were in 2013. So, I'm certain that when Carrie White gets picked up again one day by a fan who is now a movie director and wants to remake it, the next offering will be a far cry from the 2013 version and an even further cry from the 1976 version, where the world was in a drastically different place in both social attitudes, lifestyle technology and the capabilities of movie special effects. Just to be clear here, I'm talking about remaking original films, not rebooting. This isn't a direct sequel or parts of the lore reimagined and relaunched or a new cast signed for a trilogy. This is a classic movie remade for modern audiences. So, let's get down to it. Question 1. Do we sometimes over-revere the original films? Imagine tomorrow that a Jaws remake was announced, or an Alien remake, or a Blade Runner remake, or an Indiana Jones, or any classic film which is regarded with love. I would be the first to say that you could never recapture the lightning in a bottle of Jaws, ironically brought about by a shot that didn't work and a filming schedule which went from disaster to catastrophe. And I would also be asking the question, why? Why do we need to remake it? Back in 2003, when a Dawn of the Dead remake was announced, the writer James Gunn, yes, he of the Suicide Squad and Cavill cancelling, got death threats when he was announced as the writer. Now, I find the idea of anybody sending death threats over a film a truly ridiculous notion, but minus the death threat side, I was also disgusted that they would even consider remaking the best zombie horror film ever made. I first watched Romero's Dawn of the Dead, as I did with many horror films back when I was a kid in the 80s, on a massive brick of a TV with a 20-inch screen placed in the middle of the 2-ton monstrosity. Having recorded the movie on VHS cassette on late night BBC 2, I fell in love with it and have enjoyed all the reissues and even the 4K remaster special edition which was released not long back. However, despite its greatness, and even by the admission of the great Tom Savini, Dawn of the Dead is dated. The makeup wasn't great, the blood was an odd colour, and both the sound effects, fashion and overall look of the film is now antiquated compared to modern day movies. Now, not to compare it to The Walking Dead, or even the more comedic efforts like Shaun of the Dead, but everything from movie makeup techniques, shopping malls, societal appetite for violence, and the commodification of zombies has changed dramatically. I now approach life through a much more mature, balanced and contextual manner, so, no longer the naive 20-something when the Dawn remake was announced, I can see remakes for another purpose entirely. Now, I was never going to accept any of that back when Snyder and Gunn's Dawn was announced, as I was emotionally attached and deeply in love with the original Dawn of the Dead, and also because I couldn't see that remaking a great original film could have the benefit of opening up the original to a whole new generation of movie lovers and wasn't just about making money for the studio. Remakes can rekindle love for films which would never generally be sought out, so one plus side of this is that the original will always remain in the annals of time, but with a grand spanking new remake in cinemas, a whole new generation could go out and watch the original and it could possibly inspire them as it once inspired me. Times change and, from Carrie to Jaws to Alien to Indiana Jones, some things don't stand the test of time in movies, and a remake can fix the cosmetic and historic faults we don't want to admit in our beloved originals. Also, audiences change, and if I was growing up in the 2010s and going to the cinema or watching films on my high-def flat screen, not to mention the challenges and anxieties which are present now which weren't present in 1976, the younger ones growing up today look at the old films and don't identify with what is being portrayed. Movies change, times change, and so do people, so surely they deserve a great film modernised to their tastes. Now, for the record, I really liked the Dawn of the Dead remake, and although I don't want to spend this video reviewing it, I thought that director Zack Snyder did a really good job with it. So, this brings me to question 2. How much should a remake honour, replicate and follow the original? For this discussion, we're going to look at just 3 particular films. I could use about 10, but I want to make my discussion more concise, and thus I have chosen 3 films, all horror, but each one with a very different approach from the creative team making it. So, for continuity, we'll be sticking with Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, but we will also look at Samuel Bayer's 2010 remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street starring Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy Krueger, and released in the same year, Matt Reeves' reimagining of the Swedish horror film Let the Right One In, which was retitled Let Me In, which starred, of course, the wonderful Cody Schmidt-McPhee and the ever-fantastic Chloe Grace Moretz of the aforementioned 2013 Carrie. Let Me In is slightly different to Dawn of the Dead and Elm Street, as the Swedish original only came out the year before in 2009. Part of the reason Reeves and the studio remade it was because American audiences were not going to flock to see a subtitled foreign film that was very European. Let Me In was about cashing in on the popularity of Let the Right One In, but putting it through a more Americanized prism, so, for much of the film, shots are replicated and the storyline stays exactly the same. The aim was to mince Let the Right One In through a more palatable lens and put the same film out, but with 2 budding, young and fairly well-known actors taking the roles and a healthier sprinkling of sepia and darkness. Let Me In follows its original almost faithfully, as it was about selling a film which was universally loved but not commercially consumed to the masses. For Nightmare on Elm Street, they didn't follow a shot-by-shot mentality or even a 90% faithfulness, and instead just honoured the Nancy and Freddy dynamic. They followed the first film's narrative and ideas, including Tina's ceiling-dragging death, this time with a character called Chris, and also some famous scenes like Nancy's bathtub scene. But they swapped Freddy from being a child killer to a child molester, and, although Freddy is pulled into the real world at the end, just like in the original, Nancy's suggested madness from the 1984 version is lost, and we lose the bizarre and trippy original's end where a car drives Nancy and her friends off while a blow-up doll of her mother is pulled through a front window. Overall, the film tries to modernise things, but generally only keeps the skeleton of the original script. However, the problem with Elm Street, and referenced in my Tale of Two Freddys video, is that the new ideas offer nothing to the story. Jackie Earle Haley's makeup is awful, and, despite Haley playing a decent Krueger, the film isn't scary and wastes its biggest new idea, the micro-naps, in a few scenes of well-shot but ultimately dull moments. Robert Englund, who played the original Freddy, stated that he felt that before the release of the 2010 version, all of the previous 7 Elm Streets were released on Blu-ray, and this hurt the new film. However, I feel that trying to remake what worked from the original, yet bringing stale new characters in with forgettable scenes and an uncertainty of whether the film wanted to be a whole new reboot or remake, the film is half of both and a complete mess. By doing the Nancy storyline, but changing Freddy's history, we got a film of inferior, Xeroxed scenes which did little more than highlight how brilliant the original was. Dawn of the Dead, on the other hand, keeps the more, zombies and a couple of crucial lines from the original, the shoot them in the head and the dead will walk the earth, as well as the discussion of why they are coming back to them all, but the film jettisons everything else. Apart from the setting and the fact that there are zombies, there is nothing in the remake of Dawn which resembles the 1980s version. Starting off with Sarah Polly's Anna having a really long day at the hospital where she works, where the first titillations of an outbreak are briefly discussed, she goes home, doinks her boyfriend in the shower, and then wakes up to her neighbour, a small child, munching on said boyfriend. She barely escapes, drives into the wilderness, and, after crashing to a standstill, finds a few ragtag survivors and Arby's narrator Ving Rhames, who doesn't have the meats on this occasion, and they head to the mall where they are imprisoned by CJ and his pathetic little minions, who don't really want anyone in their territory. Anyway, then a truck turns up with a few douchebags and some other eatable extras, and the film follows their slow realisation that the mall is actually their prison, not salvation, and, after turning 2 buses into Mad Max vehicles, they aim to rescue their friend from across the street and head for a small yacht which could hopefully take them to an uninfected island. 2004's Dawn of the Dead follows the original in terms of its themes, one of the most prominent being resource guarding, as CJ wishes to keep them all for himself, but upon losing control of it, is forced to be a prisoner as more people are let in, and this microcosm of a world slowly becomes unsustainable. By jettisoning the idea to copy the original of just 4 main cast who land on the mall and decide to stay, initially thriving in their artificial world before realising that they have imprisoned themselves in a false Eden, the remake plays with both humour, moral dilemmas and has more character dynamics than the 1980 version. With gun shop owner Andy stuck across the road and separated by an impenetrable sea of zombies, they are forced to watch this man slowly starve to death and, upon trying to shepherd food to him via an Uber Eats dog, their escape plan is accelerated and many of the cast die. However, the sheer amount of characters creates a problem, as there is little time to get to know any of them, and only Sarah Polley's Anna and Michael Kelly's CJ, the best character in the film and the one who carries the most poignant character redemption and saddening death, stand out above the collective misfits who are visually identifiable, but characterless overall. However, by making the zombies run instead of shamble, using amazing makeup and an army of the undead paid for by the film's bigger budget, you can feel the siege happening at all times in Dawn 2004, and, when the barricades are finally broken and the dead get in, there is a genuine sense of desperation and panic as betrayal, loyalties and tragedies mount. By deciding not to just Xerox scenes from the original and make a movie which has the name, location, but little else, we watch Dawn unfold without the spoiler of knowing what's going to happen. For fans of the original, we haven't seen this film as it's different from the 1980 original, and, for those who have never seen Romero's Dawn, there's enough characters and dilemmas to keep you guessing as, in true James Gunn writing style, nobody is safe and anyone can die no matter how much you like them. So, does a remake need to abandon everything in the original? Or should a remake honour as much as it could? Let Me In was universally panned upon announcement, with many saying people should just watch Let the Right One In, but when finally released, Reeves's version was revered and hailed as most people appreciated what he, Moretz and McPhee had created. The Elm Street film, on the other hand, was garnering some excitement with the casting of Jackie Earle Haley, fresh off playing Rorschach in Snyder's Watchmen, but the film was widely hated upon release and Freddy hasn't been touched since. So, this now leads us on to question 3. What's the benchmark for a good remake? For me, I think my favourite remake is John Carpenter's The Thing. A remake of 1951's The Thing from Another World, Carpenter's film still holds up with some of the best practical effects and, with both great characters, a spiraling sense of chaos and inevitability, an action-packed end and more gore than you can shake a stick at, it's up there with The Fog, Halloween, Escape from New York and Prince of Darkness in terms of Carpenter's best. The Thing had a difficult production at times, what with Carpenter working with his largest budget to date and, considering the studio failed in marketing the film, it was at the time a complete flop and only since garnered reputation via DVD, Blu-ray, some brilliant 4K special editions and a cult audience which grew upon its home release. Now dated but no less ferocious, The Thing succeeds in engendering the feelings that come with watching a great movie. It takes you on a thrill ride of horror, excitement, great characters and an ever-increasing feeling of dread. By The Thing's logic, a more modernised film should be better, and maybe we are misunderstanding remakes a little and holding them too close to the originals when they first come out. With visual effects and advances in filmmaking, the logic should lean towards remakes bettering the originals in terms of following a crucial rule of the remake, the rule being modernisation. Yet this often isn't the case and, reverence and personal taste aside, the originals are still held up as fine examples of filmmaking despite some of these films being decades old. So, are the filmmakers and studios to blame? Well, possibly. The original Elm Street and Dawn of the Dead were films where the director was trusted to make his opus and, apart from cuts to gore and time and the limitations of effects and locations, the original version was left largely to its director. However, plenty of films are remade by competent directors who love the originals, so what goes wrong? Or, if you're a bigger fan of the new films which are coming out, like the remakes of Carrie, The Fog, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Crazies and many others, then what works for you in them? Do younger eyes look at previous films through a lens of dated hilarity? Does CG make things better? Or does more modern mean more relatable? Remakes aren't going to stop and, whether it's because of rights, creators passing away, new studios like Blumhouse getting rights to classics and convincing the original teams they can do it justice, or fans who finally make it to the industry and offered any film you want after a box office debut smash, we're going to have to face a lot more of our precious films being put through the mangle. So, like I said at the start, what do you think? What remakes do you love, hate have a soft spot for, and, more interestingly, what originals deserve a remake? Or should we just leave all the classics well alone? Debates in the comments section are always enlightening, and I've really enjoyed some of the topics raised with alternative viewpoints and new criticisms being brought to the table. Anyway, that's it for now, so until next time, I'll catch you later.